L'Aquila means literally eagle, the city in a valley overlooked by the highest mountain peak in the region. It was a beautiful place, the tight winding streets packed with a series of churches and an ancient castle. 70,000 people though, living in the knowledge that L'Aquila constantly faced the threat of earthquakes, including one in 1703 which killed thousands. Then at the end of March 2009 came a severe bunch of foreshocks before the city was awoken and devastated on the 6th of April by a quake of nearly 6 on the Richter scale. More than 300 people finally declared dead and tens of thousands made homeless as buildings and the city's rich cultural heritage were reduced to rubble. Initially, the efforts to help the city were praised, including a visit by the country's Prime Minister.
Non c'è più niente! Silvia, aiutaci, Silvia! Silvia, aiutaci! Non c'è più niente! Non c'è più niente!
Adesso vedrai. Sì, signore, stia tranquilla, vadi in albergo intanto, sei qua. È tutto distrutto, vadi in albergo.
Non sto rientrando.
Allora sta lì.
Però la casa sta lì.
Va bene, ma adesso arriverà, rifacciamo tutto, dai. Su,
Ho tanto fiducia!
Vedrai che non lasciamo indietro.
Well, that summer, the G8 World Summit was moved to L'Aquila to draw attention to its plight. Later, though, some prosecuted for carrying out poor reconstruction work. Well, now the people of L'Aquila live with the ongoing fear of further earthquakes. Italy divided by two plates, the Eastern Adria microplate slowly sliding beneath the European plate, pushing the entire range of Apennine mountains higher as a result. In the summer of 2016, another nearly 300 people killed in the quake centred on Amatrice, just an hour's drive north. So how much of the city has now been reconstructed and how do the people live with its past? Well, Natalia Mendoza revisits L'Aquila for France 24.
Nothing has changed here since that day. The only difference is that the vegetation has covered everything. Every now and then I come back here because I miss my home.
For Vito La Terza, coming back here means reliving the memories of that night on April 6, 2009, when he was rudely awakened by the earthquake shortly after 3:30 in the morning.
We wanted to escape, but this door was blocked. We had to force it open. Then we saw the pieces of rock that had come off the building and were falling. People were screaming, crying, yelling. The panic was indescribable. This was my cellar.
The day after the earthquake, looters took any objects of value. Everything else stayed where it was, intact.
This is my daughter's crib. Her toys are still there. A part of my heart stayed here. I have memories of such a happy life here.
Vito's building didn't collapse. Everyone who lived there escaped. Others weren't so lucky.
Our building was there. Right there. This is all that's left. I remember that night and the terrifying sound. Then the building collapsed, trapping us beneath it.
Vincenzo Vittorini was rescued after being trapped under the rubble for 8 hours. But for his wife and daughter, along with 25 neighbors, it was too late. Today, Vincenzo says the government didn't do enough to protect them. There had been weak tremors in the area in the months before the earthquake, warning signs the authorities ignored.
They reassured us, telling us that these weak tremors were nothing to be afraid of. And so that night, when we felt some light shaking around 11 p.m. or 1 a.m., we weren't worried. and stayed inside.
To find out why there was no warning, he brought his case before the L'Aquila tribunal. Representing a group of victims, he filed a request for damages in the criminal trials before the court in 2011, in the hope of holding the Italian authorities responsible for what happened. Called to testify this morning is a geologist, one of a group of experts tasked with assessing the risks posed by the weak tremors that preceded the tragedy.
When the group of experts met, did anyone spend time studying the state of the buildings in L'Aquila? Did anyone ask, are we sure that these structures can resist a strong earthquake? In this area, where tremors have been happening for months?
Let's say that everyone who attended this meeting was aware of the potential risks.
Vincenzo believes those risks were ignored, at the cost of 309 lives.
This is all a farce. In L'Aquila, the state was at fault. They should have done a real analysis of the risk and communicated it to the people. That's what they should have done, but no one did it. They did the opposite, telling us there was nothing to worry about.
Today, 6 out of the 7 experts accused have been acquitted, as well as the head of the Italian Department of Civil Defense. A blow to the victims. But some survivors have decided to take up the fight themselves. Marta Valente is one of them. L'Aquila, the day after the earthquake. Marta was the last person to make it out alive after a 23-hour ordeal.
I remember applause when they rescued me. And I remember crying out, "Thank you."
During the course of her 5-year recovery, Marta has received no financial help from the Italian state.
When I was hospitalized, my medical support was paid for. But the expenses that came after that were left to me and to my family.
That's because the Italian state refuses to consider her a victim of the disaster. Like other L'Aquila students at the time, she was registered as living with her parents in another town. Helped by her lawyer, Marta has been fighting to be recognized ever since.
The state defined an area, a perimeter, a radius, within which people have the right to compensation for material damages, fiscal aid, etc. And my client Marta was inside this perimeter.
Even today, their calls to the authorities are left unanswered. For Marta, it's a bitter pill to swallow.
They treat it as though I wasn't there, even though there are medical records that prove I was. I feel abandoned, non-existent to the state.
A statement that feels like the final fall from grace for this town that still bears the scars of the disaster. A town where time seems to have stopped. Everywhere, memorials to those who are gone. And ruined buildings lining deserted streets. Very different from the thriving town Vito knew.
Before there were people here, it was lively. Now the inhabitants are gone. The town centre is in ruins. Look at what's become of this street. It used to be one of the most important streets in the town.
Today, the town center of L'Aquila is deserted. There are no supermarkets, no post office. Before the earthquake, there were close to 1,000 businesses. Now, there are only 20. One of them is Vito's Delicatessen. In 2011, he was one of the first to reopen for business, even if his customers are scarce.
Everyone told me I was crazy to reopen here. But for me, it's a way to help the town, just by being open. Even if I don't earn anything and must sacrifice a lot, It's important, and I'm happy to be back here.
Like over 10,000 other L'Aquila residents, Vito still lives in the temporary housing that was built in the suburbs for the earthquake victims. The rent may be modest, but the housing is in the middle of the countryside. At the time, Silvio Berlusconi's government described the arrangement as temporary. Tiziana and her family still live there, more than 7 years after the earthquake.
My house still hasn't been rebuilt. I don't have any idea how much longer I'll need to live here. They only told me that as long as my house is not habitable, I can stay here.
Her son Flavio was born the year after the earthquake. He has never lived in his family home. All his life, he has attended school in these temporary buildings. Today, none of the schools damaged by L'Aquila's earthquake have been rebuilt.
These schools were supposed to be temporary, but honestly, we don't know. For now, anyways, I feel better knowing that my son is one of these temporary school buildings. We've seen how stone schools don't hold up well in the earthquakes. These are safer.
Safer because these temporary structures are supposed to be earthquake-proof. Yet this is not always the case. Commander Sergio Aloya's brigade of the financial police is on the case.
We, along with other police forces, are doing systematic controls of these building sites to check the companies and to confirm who the construction managers are effectively in charge at these sites.
In the last few years, Aloya's men have discovered corruption and faulty workmanship at these reconstruction sites. These buildings have cost the state €18 million.
Here, a part of the building collapsed due to construction problems. Look at the balcony over there, on the second floor. The materials they used did not correspond to the technical specifications laid out in the call for tenders.
The poor condition of these buildings is apparent everywhere you look.
And look here, this other balcony is also about to collapse. Some of the material on the bottom is already falling off. We can see that the balcony was not well insulated or even properly attached to the wall.
In this investigation, 37 people were indicted for fraud against the Italian state. Pending trial, all homes have been seized. In 3 years, the prosecutor of L'Aquila has opened more than 200 investigations related to the earthquake, some of which pointed to the involvement of Camorra, the Neapolitan mafia.
The Casalesi clan, a part of Camorra, specializes in construction contracts. They have a strong presence in this sector because the profits are enormous.
Commander Vito Sinforoso of the Financial Guard has forces working undercover in the region. Thanks to intercepted phone calls, they have learned how the Casalesi clan has profited from the public funds set aside for reconstruction.
On the face of it, they set up perfect accounts that were above suspicion. But workers, after they were paid, were forced to repay a large part of their salaries in cash.
Here, we hear a construction worker asking the mafia member how he should make this payment. The Financial Guard estimates that €85 million have been embezzled from construction projects since the earthquake. For the mayor of L'Aquila, his management is not at fault.
It's not our fault L'Aquila has been abandoned by both the right and the left political parties. There haven't been any laws to regulate either the reconstruction or the money. It's been a battle.
Today, he's proud to show us the first signs of reconstruction around City Hall.
We're preparing the water duct.
How far have you gotten?
Over there by the corner of City Hall.
And now, starting from here?
Yes, and we should be able to get to the corner over there.
So businesses should be able to open here by Christmas?
Yes, they should.
Over here, look. This is where all the city services will pass, like fibre optic cables and water. By 2019, the whole town centre will have been rebuilt, and it will be one of the largest in Italy.
One site has become the emblem of L'Aquila's rebirth. The St. Mary of Suffrage Church has watched over the main square of L'Aquila since the 18th century. The day after the earthquake, its collapsed cupola became one of the symbols of the tragedy. Today, its reconstruction is nearly complete. It was financed in part by the French state with a contribution of €3,250,000. The cupola has been returned to its original shape, and each decorative piece is being restored by hand.
We restore each piece individually. Here we have the flowers that decorated the interior of the vault. When they're finished, we will hang them back inside the cupola.
Night falls on L'Aquila as construction sites shut down for the day. A day that has seen few clients for Vito, who prepares to close his shop, dreaming of better days for his town.
Natalia Mendoza revisiting L'Aquila for France 24. Well, that's all from this week's edition. Of course, you can catch it again on our website at france24.com and all the previous editions as well. Thanks for watching. More news coming up very shortly. Stay with us.